I'm going to read the Chairman's safety announcement. The building fire alarm signal is a continuous two-tone alarm. On hearing the evacuation alarm, leave the building by the nearest marked exit route. Follow the green signs to the assembly point, large staff car park opposite the entrance to the building. Anyone who cannot use the stairs will be helped by the officers present after other people have left. Do not return to the building until told it is safe to do so by an authorised officer. The whole of the council site is a no smoking area. Mobile phones must be switched to silent. So I move to the agenda. Agenda item 1 is to note substitutes in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 4, substitutes at meetings. I've got Councillor Whitaker for Councillor Sweatman, Councillor Eggleston for Councillor Speracci, Councillor Forbes for Councillor Pulfer. Item 2, to receive apologies for absence. I've got apologies have been received from Councillor Edwards, Councillor Pulfer, Councillor Sweatman and Councillor Speracci. Apologies have been received from observing Cabinet members, Councillor Belsey and Councillor Cromie. Agenda item 3, to receive declarations of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. Councillor Eggleston.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In respect of item 8, I declare a personal interest as I am leader of Burgess Hill Town Council.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. And can I say how nice it is to come back to this committee and to be back in this chamber. I have to declare a personal interest on item 6 arising from my membership of Worth Parish Council. After consideration, I've concluded that my interest is prejudicial and I shall therefore pay no part in the proceedings. I will leave the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cartwright.
Similar to Councillor Eggleston, I'm a member of Burgess Hill Town Council.
Thank you. And Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I too am a member of Burgess Hill Town Council.
Thank you. I see no other hands raised. So we'll move to agenda item 4. To confirm the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 23rd of March. We're going to vote using the microphone touch screen. So I would ask you to vote to agree the minutes now, please. That's all agreed?
Yes, Chairman. All those that voted are, well, no, 4 have abstained because presumably they weren't at the meeting, and there's 9 in favour, so it's carried.
Thank you. So now I move to agenda item 5 to consider any items that the Chairman agrees to take as urgent business. I have none. So we'll move to agenda item 6, which is the Community Governance Review draft recommendations for Worth Parish Council. I move to go to Terry Stanley, the Business Unit Leader for Democratic Services, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chairman. Following our initial public consultation, the report before you explains the findings of our Community Governance Review, the first stage of the public consultation, and it also explains our draft recommendations for Worth Parish Council as a result of that first public consultation. We're really grateful to the 2 campaign entities that sent in such fulsome submissions, a number of parish councillors and also ward members for their submissions, a local organisation as well, and especially to the registered local government electors who have contributed in the main really quite incisive submissions which gave us much to consider. The draft recommendations as a result of this first stage of the review are shown on page 13 paragraphs 37 to 43. And it is these that we're consulting the committee about, as they would form the basis for the second stage public consultation. And with that, I shall be glad to answer any questions that members may have. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, we go to the committee to debate this item. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you very much. Can I ask a question about the alleged cost of splitting the councils? One council has, I believe, Parish Council in general, have said it's about potentially £150,000. I think Representative Crawley Down have said it's nearer 20,000, and there are sort of allegations that maybe, just reading what was written in the submissions, a bit like scare tactics to put people off wanting the two to split due to the cost. Can we ever get that nailed down so when the second consultation comes out that the public will have a fair idea? Because if it is nearer the lower end, some people might think, oh, maybe the two should split. So could we have a bit of clarity on that, please?
I go to Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Chapman is right that there was a disparity between the estimation of the proposers and the estimation of Worth Parish Council as to what the cost of the division might be. It's a very large disparity, and that is something that is reflected in a number of the comments we received from the public. And so that really informs the recommendation at paragraph 37, which states that at an early stage of the second public consultation, Worth Parish Council and the petitioners should supply to this review their assessment of the division costs with evidential annotations for each, because we would like to see how they've been arrived at. I think it's fair to say that those conversations have been ongoing for some time between the two campaign entities, and so it's hoped that very shortly they will be able to provide that information to the review in a more sort of agreed form. I suspect the true costs will come in somewhere in the middle, but we have been liaising with them. And it has been proposed, I should inform the committee, it has been proposed that we defer the start of the second part of the public consultation for 1 week. So instead of starting it on the 6th of June, we would start it on the 13th of June to allow the Parish Council and the proposers a bit more time to agree those costs, because it would be really good to have better information in the public domain on which to consult them, and certainly the proposers are agreeable to that.
Thank you. Can I just check with that, what you have just said then, Terry, that so if that's going back 1 week, that means the consultation would then end in the middle of August, and that would still give time?
It would still
give for the recommendations to come to this committee in September?
It would essentially take a week off of the public consultation period of 2 months, so we would be 7 weeks instead of 8, and the timescale would be maintained in order to publish the final recommendations on the 6th of September and bring it back to this committee on the 14th of September and then on to Council.
Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Eggleston.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And really also following up on the recommendations, I see that 37, 38 and 39 are really searching for further information and better particulars, which then leads me on to why we have a recommendation in 41, which is emphatically saying that the arrangements stay the same. So is it possible that at the end of the second consultation, that when all of the additional information is gathered, that the final recommendations could be that you do set up a Crawley Down Parish Council and a Copthorne Parish Council? So that's question one. Then looking at 42, and I suppose this partly reflects being a town councillor, and I guess it's the same for members from East Grinstead and Haywards Heath, where we are used to having contested elections, and there's no proposal to reduce the number of councillors, and that might be correct for this parish. But the reality is that in the last 3 electoral cycles, all of the councillors have been elected unopposed, and intuitively, it doesn't seem electorally right to basically appoint 17 people to be parish councillors, and just wonder whether it is worth considering a reduction in the number of parish councillors so that you do actually have competitive elections. So you do get the sense that people really want to do it and are prepared to knock on doors and talk to people to become a parish councillor rather than effectively get it of right. Thank you.
Terry, would you like to go back on that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So in regard to the first point, which was to do with recommendation 41, yes, we are about to, following the consultation with this committee, we would be entering into a second public consultation. As you say, I would very much hope that we have better information and particulars for the public to consider. That could very well result in, an overwhelming view from members of the public, one way or the other, and that could very much change the our final recommendations. So yes, I mean, we're driven by what comes back in terms of the public consultation. On the second point, yes, what you refer to is a nationally recognised electoral problem, I'm afraid, at parish level, and it does happen in all manner of places. What we feel at the moment, at this stage in the review, that based upon the current electorate, which is rising, not decreasing, the current councillor numbers and indeed the representation for each ward are right as it stands at the moment, but certainly nothing is off the table. We could certainly consider councillor numbers in the second stage of the review.
Thank you. Councillor Llewellyn Burke.
Thank you, Chairman. There's mention of the Royal Oak pub, and this seems to be, it's one building, but it's, when you drive past it, it is very noticeable of the state that it's in, and it's been in the state for a long time, and I believe it's an asset of community value. I didn't check that, but I seem to recall it is. And I wondered whether in the consultation papers, whether we could perhaps make it clear to the residents what the status of that building is and whether or not the district council can help with it, which I doubt it can as it's privately owned, but that it might alter their views if they think it can or cannot be helped, whereas probably in reality, because it's privately owned, it's as it is. But just a suggestion, thank you.
I'm going to go to Terry, please.
Yes, indeed. Councillor Llewellyn Burke alights on an issue which has come through loud and clear in the course of this review, that many people feel very strongly about the dilapidated state of the Royal Oak pub, and believe that a new parish council could resolve that issue. We are certainly in a position in terms of the community governance review regulations to adjust the terms of reference as we move through the review. So that is definitely a suggestion that we would take on board to incorporate into the terms of reference the status of the Royal Oak pub, because it is privately owned.
Thank you. Tom Clark, I go to the solicitor to the council.
Yeah, just following up from what Councillor Llewellyn Burke has said, Terry has said that some people think it will be solved by splitting the parish council. Other people say it will make absolutely no difference at all. So they're split over that argument. And in relation to Councillor Eggleston, we haven't had anybody saying that they think there's too many councillors. We do have to follow what the representations are back, and no one has said that to date. They may do it under the second consultation. And you're right that we can put forward a proposal but it may be that no one agrees with it in the second consultation.
Thank you. Can I go to Councillor Clark, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. We talked about councillors and numbers of councillors and costs of the council. Is there any implications of extra costs that's not in the cost that's been talked about, or in staff, actual officer in the two councillors, in the two parish, if there was two parish councillors? Will it mean redundancy payments? Will there be any other costs that are not in these figures, or any people affected by the either staying the same or, sorry, not staying the same, but being split? Thank you.
Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. Certainly, if it were resolved that a new parish council were created for Crawley Down, there would be staffing issues in terms of whether existing staff of the Worth Parish Council were willing to transfer under TUPE regulations to that parish council, and or potentially some changes to staffing, or indeed recruitment to the new parish council, depending on the outcome of that. It is something that, having looked at the indicative budget referred to at paragraph 38, and which has been variously commented upon on social media, that it may well be that staffing costs and legal costs associated with those changes may well have to be looked at by the proposers in more detail. That's certainly something that we feel, and that's another reason why we've got the recommendation at paragraph 38, so we're conscious of that.
Thank you. Can I go to Councillor Whittaker now, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, obviously there's a lot of feeling and a lot of work that's gone in on effectively both sides to this. Is there a way with legislation, maybe addressed to Mr Clark here, where a possible local referendum could come in here to kind of, as a potential solution here? Because if this drags on, and then clearly emotions are only going to get higher and stronger with more representation. So it just feels a bit 50-50 to me looking at the figures, and I just remember my mind going back 5 years. Maybe there is a clearer way here.
Shall I go to Mr Clark or Terry? To Mr Clark, please. To Tom.
Yes, there was talk about a referendum, but you probably put the nail on it that they often end up 50-50 anyway, so it doesn't solve any problems. I remember a lot at Bolney, and they kept being 48-52 and then 52-48 the other way. It never actually solved anything.
Okay.
Could it be legally possible?
They could have a referendum, but they'd have to pay for it, so it'd be quite expensive.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Mr Clark. Can I go to Councillor Forbes, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I think my questions, which I put down here, have already been answered by Terry. It was just to do with costs, really. Would they include, if, as Councillor Eckerton says, there has to be an election, so that would be for Copthorne and Crawley Down separate, what the cost of that is. It's also the public sector loan that they've taken out as a parish to purchase the hub. And the bits about the Royal Oak, the owner of that, to my knowledge, I think it's 2-3 years ago, wants in the region of £1 to £1.5 million. So I don't really know where any parish council was going to get that sort of money. Thank you, Tim.
Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, clearly there is more work to be done on the costs, and indeed we are at the moment gathering a forecast of the election costs for both councils, so that can inform the work that they're going to do on their indicative budget for 2023, because as members will be aware, there's a lot of inflationary pressures at the moment. So we're going to provide a more precise estimate of that, because I do feel that the amount set aside for elections in the Crawley Down one is insufficient. Yes, we're cognizant of the public sector board loan, and that's referred to in the report. And yes, because the Royal Oak is in private ownership and is such an important local issue, I understand all the feelings around that, as has been alluded to already by Councillor Llewellyn-Burke. I don't think there's really a role for Mid-Sussex District Council in that matter.
Thank you. Can I go to Councillor Cartwright, please?
Thank you. Just a bit of information, Terry, if you could give it. What are the criteria for deciding as to whether to split a council into two or not? Because I can see the arguments going both ways, but I mean, in terms of making the decision, are there any legal guidelines as to why one should go one way or the other?
Terry.
Yes. We follow the Community Governance Review guidance set out by the government in 2010 and as amended by their statutory instrument in 2015. It does have to be a qualitative and objective exercise rather than a numbers game, hence the Community Governance Review. I mean, the criteria would really be, as are outlined in our terms of reference, that you know, it provides for community cohesion, it provides for better local democracy, better delivery of services, better delivery of local government. So those are the kind of criteria that we assess it against, and those are the criteria that we've asked public respondents to write to in their submissions. And I have to say, we've been very impressed with the submissions we've been having, which largely do one way or another address those points. I think the difficulty we've had on this occasion with this review is that views are just so polarised. You know, there's a lot of issues that have come up in addition to those that we set out in the terms of reference. So I hope that sort of partially answers your question.
Thank you, Terry. Can I go to Tom Clark, please?
Yeah, Terry's outlined what the Act says. There was a court case quite recently involving Slough Council. They didn't follow what the public were saying to them, and they tried to do something different. And the High Court said, no, you've got to follow what the representations are. The difficulty here, as Councillor Whittaker has said, they're almost 50-50. So it's rather difficult.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I don't see anyone else indicating that they would like to speak. I will move now to what the draft recommendations. Can I just clarify before we get to them with Mr. Clark? Do we need to put something in, following discussion about the Royal Oak pub, do we need to put in a statement into the recommendations about clarifying the status for residents? Or do we not need to do anything?
Well, it'll be in the minutes, Chairman, and we'll take it on board, so I don't think you need to put it in the recommendations.
All right, thank you. And I will go to the recommendations now. I'm going to take the recommendations in two parts, because if you look at, we go to the recommendations, which are at point 3 on page 9, and point 3, and then little 1, little 3, and little 4. Those items we're just asked to note. So I'm just going to read those. So we're asked to note the findings of the first public consultation. Then we're asked to note that following the second public consultation, further findings and the final recommendations of the principal electoral authority will be presented to this committee on the 14th of September, and to note the final decision will be taken by the Council in the light of the consultation responses received through the Community Governance Review. So I'll take a vote on that now, accepting those that we're noting that. go to the legal officer for...
Yes, that's everyone has voted in favour of that, Chair.
Thank you. And then I'll go to recommendation. It's point 3 and it's little point 2, and this is where we've been debating the advice given. So what we're recommending here is to provide advice upon and further to that advice we're agreeing the principle of electoral authorities draft recommendations for Worth Parish Council, upon which a second public consultation would be conducted. This consultation will be delayed by 1 week to start on the 13th of June. Is that agreed?
Yes, Chairman, 12 people have voted and all are in favour.
Thank you. I did vote.
You might want to rerun it because we should have 13.
Okay, members, in the light of there must have been some technical difficulty with that, we need to rerun that vote. So please, can we have another go? Is that right? Okay, thank you. That is passed unanimously. Thank you.
Chairman, 13 in favour.
Thank you. Okay, would somebody there to go and tell Mr. Gibson, Councillor Gibson? Thank you. Thank you, committee. Now I'm going to move to agenda item 7, which is the Community Governance Review, the draft recommendations for Hurstpierpoint and Sayers Common Parish Council, which are on page 17 to 22 of your report. I'm going to go to Terry Stanley, the Business Unit Leader for Democratic Services, for this.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So again, with Hurstpierpoint and Sayers Common, we have conducted the initial stage of the Community Governance Review public consultation. And this report, in the light of that, explains our findings on that first public consultation, and also explains, as a result of that, our draft recommendations, paragraphs 28 to 34 on page 20. So this is at exactly the same stage of community governance review as the previous item we were just discussing. Again, we're very grateful to all the campaign entities and the public and ward members who really did contribute fulsomely to this and gave much incisive information for us to consider. So we're now consulting the committee on those draft recommendations on page 20, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that members have about that.
Before we move to the debate on this, I'd just like to state for transparency that today I've received a further representation from Sayers Common Village Society. I'm going to recommend that they submit the points they've made in this representation today to the second stage of that consultation. That's just so that if anybody is watching, they know that that has been received. Okay, so I open the debate to members. Can I go to Councillor Eggleston?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I also received the Sayers Common representation. I've also received via Councillor Alison Bennett, and this is maybe we could do the same thing, from the chairman of Hurstpierpoint and Sayers Common Parish Council, who raises a number of points. I've been asked to read it, but I suspect it's not appropriate at this scrutiny committee. But if I forward it to you, would you be able to feed back to them to make
their
representations
yes,
as well?
certainly.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, can I go to Councillor Dempsey?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a point of clarification, if possible, on point 29 about the case for a financially sustainable parish not being evidenced with so few electors. And my understanding is, and this actually relates to the points made by Sayers Common Village group, that there are examples of smaller parish councils in the area, specifically Fulking and Twynham, Poynings and Albourne. So I'm just curious to know the thinking that went into the assessment that it wasn't big enough for that. Thank you.
I'll go to Terry, please, for an answer.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we had a very detailed submission from a local government elector in that area, extremely knowledgeable about parish and parish budget matters. What that submission was saying, if you perused the public submissions, you might have noticed it. What that submission was saying was that based upon the precept that would be attracted for the number of electors there are even now in the Sayers Common ward, which is the bit that goes right across the A23, that would attract a certain amount of money and would leave only a small amount, £5,000 to £10,000 for the provision of services. Then when we consider that a lot of the public responses we got were saying everything to the east of the A23 doesn't identify with Sayers Common, it means that we would actually be looking at an even smaller number than the 866 that are quoted in the report. So I think what we're really saying here, and it features in the recommendations, is that, well, it features certainly in the findings, is that we would have preferred to have seen an indicative budget for a Sayers Common Parish Council, as opposed to being referred to, you know, the annual returns of other similar-sized parishes. So I think really, again, for the second consultation here, what we're looking for is better and further information about what the projected budget would be.
Thank you. Can I go to Councillor Elaine Burke, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Following really on, in a way, from what Councillor Dempsey said, my ward, as members will know, is Bolney Ward, and it's a fairly odd-shaped ward because it goes from Slough through Warninglid, Bolney, Twynham and Albourne. And Sayers Common actually sort of forms a little bubble into the ward, and the rest of it circles around it. And I do agree with the comments that were made during the consultation that there is this divide on the A23, and in Bolney Ward there are parts of Bolney Parish Council that do cross the A23, and it's quite difficult for the people, the residents who are living there, to identify with those different areas. And also the housing that might be built in Albourne, which would be added on to Sayers Common, is in a different ward, and that would alter people's ways of thinking as well. And my comment really, or question, was whether there is a statutory threshold for the number of households within a parish, because Twynham Parish itself is tiny, and I think it probably only exists for historical reasons. But in terms of what it can achieve, which is we've already touched on in the first item of the agenda this evening, what the parish councils can achieve, it seems to me that a lot of what we discuss within the 5 parish councils in my ward are things like finger posts, and probably the town councillors don't really know what finger posts are, but finger posts are a major, sorry, Councillor Eggleston, they are a major factor at the moment because of where to obtain them and the cost of them. And yet, and the clerks tend to talk to each other about it. Whereas if it was a smaller amount of parishes, or they could work together more, then that sort of buying power would be better, and there'd be a more cohesive situation between them. So I do think that we ought to have another consultation, but I did wonder what and forgive me if it's in the notes somewhere, whether there is a threshold for the amount of households per parish, because I think that's quite important to the decision and discussion.
Can I go to Terry, please, for an answer?
The National Association of Local Councillors Circular recommends a threshold from 900 local government electors rather than households. So it's based on the number of electors. I think what we reflect in the recommendations is the points that were made by the ward members, really, Councillors Trumbull and Jackson, who wrote very fully to explain that the plans envisaged for development in that area to the west of Sayers Common, if they come to fruition, will mean that there is natural development in that area which would change the characteristic of that area between Sayers Common and Auburn. And so in that sense, certainly the feeling of Councillor Jackson was that, this review is premature because we should await those developments. And I think that's why we're saying, depending on the build-out of those developments, we should look to conduct a community governance review of that whole area, not just Sayers Common, but that whole area, because you referred to Bolney and Twynham as well, in 2027 or 2029, depending on the build rate.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. I too read Councillor Jackson's submission to this review with interest, and in particular I thoroughly endorse his first point, that if Sayers Common Village residents wish to form a separate parish council, they should be free to do so. And I think that that should be clearly the basic principle in terms of what communities are allowed to do. Unfortunately, looking at the numbers, I don't feel, as we've talked about, with how far you have to go away from 50-50 before you understand that there is a marked preference one way or the other. And in other community governance reviews that I've read up on, certainly 2/3, and if not higher, seems to be a benchmark before you feel that you've got an absolute result in these things. So I feel on that point that, firstly, I agree with what he's saying, and then secondly, looking at the numbers, 13 residents voting for and 11 against does not give me a warm feeling about that. And then the second point that I've got is very, very similar to the one that Councillor Llewellyn-Burke has raised. And in some respects, I mean, the timing of this, the exercise that we're here today, follows the local government boundary review for the wards that we've followed recently. And I note with interest that in that review, Hurstpierpoint is in one ward and Sayers Common is in another. And that seems to me to be counterintuitive. So the question which I'd like to ask is that surely the tier system of local government, tiers 1, 2 and 3, so we are in tier 2, below us we have the parish and town councils in tier 3, and above that of course the county or county, I won't go through the ones that might be in it. But you can see that what I'm saying is that I would have expected a hierarchy to pass through where there is an aggregation as you move up the tier system, so that tier 2 collects up a number of tier 3 and tier 1 collects up a number of tier 2. And clearly that, if we leave Sayers Common as part of Hurstpierpoint, then that will not be achieved. Thank you.
I'll go to Terry.
That's a comment, Chairman.
Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yes. Yeah, I quite...
I was just going to say, I feel that's a comment, Councillor Gibson, rather than a question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Can I go to Tom Clark, please?
Perhaps foolishly, I'm prepared to answer it. I think that what is being said is that there is sense in what you're saying, Councillor Gibson, but at the present time it's too early because we don't know what's going to happen in terms of further development. And the concern is that what is there at the moment west of the A23 is really too small to be a parish council on its own. But that might not be the case in a few years' time.
Thank you. Can I go to Councillor Whittaker, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm drawn to paragraphs 32 and 33, and reading between the lines here, obviously, it looks like all is not well, obviously, between the two areas in one parish. Can I just ask if this district council is involved with this parish and the clerk and the leader of that parish council in any way? Because it says here that we recommend that the existing parish council thoroughly examine these concerns and adopt measures to ameliorate them. It's basically brackets and instruction. So, as a district council, I know it's a parish matter, but given it's a governance issue that we are discussing this evening and will return in September, is that advice and guidance happening from here?
Do you want to say? I'll go to Terry.
Most definitely, yes. We are engaged with the parish council on those matters, and where we are finding that there are governance issues or perceptions of governance issues, we're duty bound to raise that, obviously, in the report findings and as a recommendation. But we won't just leave the recommendation, hanging there. We will actively engage with the parish council on what might be done, what might be possible. But of course, ultimately, it is for the parish council to review and decide what they are going to do.
Can I also go to Tom Clark, please?
Yes, as Terry says, we can't instruct them, but they will have read what's come back, and they may well take steps to overcome the issues that have been raised.
Thank you. Thank you. I think there's been thorough consideration of the points made. I don't see anybody else indicating to speak, so I'm going to go now. Again, we'll take the recommendations in two parts. We'll take the recommendations, so again at point 3, and we'll do it in little 1, little 3 and little 4, which are noting and agreeing the terms of reference and guidance. Sorry, I've lost my place, sorry. Hang on, I think I'm on the wrong piece of paper. Hang on. I've got myself right. Sorry about that. So we're going to go to note and agree the terms of reference and guidance for respondents, which have been the subject of consultation with such. Where am I? I've got the wrong. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry everybody. So we're going to note.
Page 17.
What, I'm on page 20. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Terry. Sorry, we're on page 17, and we're going to point 3, and we'll note points 1, 3, and 4, which is note the findings of the first public consultation, and then we'll note the following. That's following the second public consultation, further findings and the final recommendations of the Principal Electoral Authority will be presented to this committee on the 14th of September 2022. And we'll note the final decision will be taken by Council in the light of the consultation responses received through the Community Governance Review. Is that noted? Can we vote on that, please? So, yes, everybody.
Chairman, that's all agreed.
All agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll just move to point 3.2, which is noting, and that relates to points 27 to 34 in the papers. So that's to provide advice and further to that advice to agree the principal electoral authority's draft recommendations for Hurstpierpoint and Sayers Common Parish Council, upon which a second public consultation would be conducted. Is that agreed? I think 2 people, we've only got 12 votes.
Councillor Hussain? Have we got 14?
Have we got 14?
It's got everyone.
Okay.
Okay, so
Okay.
we've got everyone.
Thank you. We've got 14 votes. Thank you. That is agreed. Okay, thank you. Now we're going to move to agenda item 8. This is the draft terms of reference for a community governance review of Burgess Hill Town Council and consequential impact for Ansty and Staplefield Parish Council. That is on page 23 to 34 of the papers. And I'll again go to Terry Stanley to introduce this item.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Members will recall that at your last meeting, this was on the agenda, and the committee had advised that we defer community governance review of this area and another area to 2025. Subsequently, as stated in the report, Mid Sussex District Council was petitioned by the electors of Burgess Hill to conduct a community governance review of Burgess Hill Town Council to examine the full extent of the warding of the Burgess Hill Town Council, but also the new wards of the Northern Arc, East and West, created by the electoral review of the Local Government Boundary Commission for England. And so, having surpassed the threshold of 7.5% electors comfortably, the council is compelled to conduct this community governance review. And so, on validation of that petition, we commenced the review, and the draft terms of reference are attached to consult with the committee again. I know we did bring the draft terms of reference to the committee before, but they are attached as links within the report to consult you again, given that we're now underway with that. And I'll be happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go to debate on this item. Councillor Llewellyn-Burke.
Can you please explain what the difference is between the fact that in the previous agenda item that has been put on hold, a decision, until it has been decided what buildings are going to be, or how many residents are going to be there, and the difference between that and Burgess Hill. And I know Burgess Hill, you've got Homes England, and it has all been decided, so presumably that is the difference, but any clarification on as to why one's been put on hold and the other hasn't might be helpful for anyone who is watching this and wants to respond to the consultation.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'll go to Terry for that.
Yes, and that is a very good point that does need to be clarified, particularly for viewers and listeners. The stages we were at with the last two agenda items we were talking about was that they were also petitioned reviews, but we had completed the first public consultation in both of those cases. So they were already started. The situation with the Burgess Hill review was, as I said, that this committee advised last time we met that we should defer those consideration of that, because we were voluntarily proposing to do community governance review because of the outcomes of the Local Government Boundary Commission review. But of course, what's happened since then is that this council has been petitioned under the community governance regulations to do the review, and that compels us to do it. So, in a sense, we would, if the timing had fallen in such a way that we had received and validated that petition, and then we were able to come to the committee and say we had received that petition and we were therefore starting it, you know, after the fact, that would be the normal run of things. But owing to the place we are in the electoral cycle, and the fact that the electoral register for 2023 does have to be produced on the 1st of December, time was short, and we had therefore to get on with, once the petition is validated, you have to get on with it. So we've commenced the review. So where we're at with this one is that we are in progress with the first phase of the public consultation, and we'll be coming to your committee on the 22nd of June with the findings and draft recommendations for that one.
Thank you. Can I go to Tom Clark, please?
I just wanted to add that, of course, that might be the outcome of the first consultation. People might say this should wait. We don't know because we haven't completed it yet.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
I note that the 6-week period includes 3 bank holidays. It finishes on a bank holiday. Could the officers just confirm that that won't prejudice the length of the period? Thank you.
Yes, Terry.
No, we don't consider that it would prejudice the length of the period. Actually, it might help respondents to be having more time to devote to this matter, as opposed to perhaps being in full-time work. So perhaps it might prove helpful to have those extra days.
Thank you. Does any other member of the committee wish to say something? Okay. Well, we will move then to the recommendations. So the recommendations are on page 23. So the committee is recommended to note and agree the terms of reference and guidance for respondents which have been the subject of consultation with statutory consultees. Point 2, to authorise the head of regulatory services to make amendments to terms of reference if additional matters arise and as otherwise may prove necessary in consultation with the committee's chairman during the period of the CGR. Point 3, and to note that a further report will be provided as this council's draft and final recommendations will be available at later stages of the review. And point 4, to note that the final decision will be taken by the council in the light of the consultation responses received through the community governance review. So members are just asked to agree that by voting now.
That's all in favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, we now move to agenda item 9 on your agenda, which is the Scrutiny Committee for Community Customer Services and Service Delivery Work Programme 2022-23. I go to Tom Clark for that.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an outline of the programme for the whole year. You'll note that your next 2 meetings are rather overwhelmed by the community governance review, but we may well have some other business for you. You'll also have noted that the cabinet responsibilities have changed, and therefore some of the business of this committee might be at other councils, and some of the business that was at other scrutiny committees will come to this committee. I think you probably have your key cabinet members at the back of the room today, Councillor Webster and Councillor Demir.
Thank you. Could I just ask, as chairman, I would like to just request that this committee receive an update on the 123 food waste trial before the February date where it's already listed. And secondly, I'd like to also ask that this committee would receive a report on the status of the leisure centre contract. Can I go to Mr. Clark?
Yes, Chairman. Certainly the leisure centre contract will be with this committee. The waste may not be with this committee, but if it was, then I'm sure the 123 could be brought forward from your February meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
I think I should just express a bit of concern then that Mr. Clark, what Mr. Clark just said. I mean, surely this is about customer services and delivery, and the waste is very clearly a key function of that particular side. I mean, I would echo your request for an early review of what's happened on the 123 trial. But I have residents who are very concerned about the lack of green bins, and I've had some correspondence with both the cabinet member and the officer. And I am concerned that over a number of factors within that, just simply that if we can't support something where there's a crying need amongst our residents, and I would suggest that it's something that this committee should be looking at. So I think that it's, there's 2 points there in terms of what is the scope of this committee, and I think it's down to the work programmes, not the responsibility of the cabinet members. And then some of the issues which we need to recognise our residents are raising with us. Thank you.
Can I go to Mr. Clark, please?
Yes, these committees were set up when the cabinet responsibilities were quite different. What we try and do is make it clear which committee is dealing with which item. So that's what we're looking to do, and we'll bring forward proposals to seek to do that. It's unfortunate if we spend a lot of time trying to decide which committee a certain item goes to. And what we've found is that the cabinet responsibilities is a more straightforward way of saying that belongs to that committee and that belongs to some other committee. But this committee will still have a full programme of work.
Thank you. And if the food waste trial doesn't come to this committee, then it will go to one of the other committees.
Yes, I think that now comes under the responsibilities of the Deputy Leader, Councillor Belsey, so it may well go to the Leader Scrutiny Committee, which is where he reports most of his matters.
Thank you. Okay, so if there's nobody else who wants to speak, I will go to the recommendations on page 35. So the committee are recommended to note the committee's work programme as set out in paragraph 5 of this report. And can I ask you to vote to agree that?
Chairman, that's all in favour.
Thank you. I go to agenda item 10, which is questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2, due notice of which has been given. I have none, so I conclude this meeting, and I ask members to remain in place for a few moments until we have indicated that the live stream has ended. This meeting is ending at 7:59.